Well, I, for one, didn't mind that they had a bad checkbook in this. There's your credit card joke. Now let's start.
We could be looking at an all-out gang war on the streets of Gotham.
The Dark Knight is back, and he has quite the ear job in Batman the Caped Crusader. So it may go without saying, a lot of us here have a huge love for Batman, the animated series. Definitely, represent where you can. It's one of our favorite shows. We have a show on here called Bat-May that Walter Benasiak does, where he goes over every single episode of Batman, the animated series. And honestly, his thoughts are almost identical to my thoughts. I mean, he really praises a lot of them and goes into great detail about the history of them and why they're so well made. So definitely check that out if you really want to know what I think of the show, on top of me talking about it in the past on Nostalgia Critic and other shows. So when I heard they were doing a Batman animated series that was once again bringing back some of the same people like Bruce Timm, I was pretty excited, and when I saw the trailer, it took me a second, but I caught on to what they were doing. The same way Batman the animated series was trying to represent the Batman comics, but had a pretty heavy lean towards the Burton movies. I figured out that that's what they were doing with this animated series, but more with the Matt Reeves movies. And both of these, of course, take from the Batman comics, but again, you could tell this one's gonna have more of a lean towards the detective angle, probably not as much action. It's going to be a little bit more dialogue heavy, and I was okay with that. I was okay with them growing it up a little bit more. I mean, Batman the Animated Series is very, very adult, but it is obviously supposed to be meant for younger people as well, and this one is very clearly trying to aim much more towards older adults, so I was very, very much okay with that. With that said, I was surprisingly underwhelmed by this show. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of let down a little bit. Even if you take out the excitement that I had and the hype that maybe a lot of other people had, I was kind of disappointed in the fact that this show makes a lot of changes, which I want. I do want changes. I don't want just Batman the Animated Series again, but they're either distracting, take away from what makes the character so interesting, or half the time just don't make sense. Like, for example, probably the biggest offender, in my opinion, is they make Harvey Dent an asshole in this, and I don't understand that. Harvey Dent, Two-Face, is one of the great Batman villains. I mean, easily top 5, maybe even top 3. And a lot of that comes from he has to be a tragic figure. He has to start off as somebody who can be really inspiring. He can change the town. He's a good guy. And if there's any dark side to him, it's either from his split personality that exists before becoming Two-Face, or it has to be something that's like this hidden dark side that he doesn't let people see, and then the ass and the Two-Face transformation brings out that dark side. But in this, they make him really mean and harsh before the transformation, and again, I thought maybe that was because he was gonna have a split personality, but he doesn't. Once in a while, he does something good in this, but like one of the good actions is giving a criminal life instead of giving him the chair. Like, that's supposed to be a good deed in this world. And when you get to the point where you see him sit down, he's going to call up a gangster to help him with his campaign, you're not really shocked by it. You don't really go, wow, I can't believe Harvey Dent is doing that. Well, no, that just kind of seems along the lines of what this character would do because you set him up as so unlikable. Bruce Wayne literally says, don't grow a conscience now, Harvey. Something is seriously wrong when Bruce Wayne is telling Harvey Dent that. So when you do get to the transformation of him having the acid on his face and turning rogue, you're not really surprised by it and you don't really feel bad for him. And they're trying to do the usual stuff that they do in this, where you're supposed to be really shocked he suddenly lashes out at someone, but he was already a mean person, so why am I supposed to feel bad?
This is a losing battle. 100 other monsters will show up to replace anyone you take down.
All of them forgettably lame as the last. They make the Penguin a mother of 2 for some reason in this world. And here's the thing, I've said this in before, I really don't mind if they change the race or the gender of a character as long as that character is gender neutral or race neutral. Like I always say, you can't really switch around the races of Huck Finn and Jim. That wouldn't make any sense. The story would crumble. But let's say they changed the gender of Jim Gordon, like you made him a woman. You could do that. Honestly, it might even be a little bit interesting if you do that. I feel like you can't do that with the Penguin. Penguin. The Penguin is a very distinct masculine character. He's got the top hat, he's got the monocle, the umbrella, the suit, and the idea is that he's supposed to blend into what this world sees as the social elite, the super upper crust. And the commentary comes from whether or not people accept him. If they accept him, then it's the idea of, oh, they're accepting this guy who's clearly looking like a villain and acting like a villain. He's a criminal, but he's rich, so they'll let that slide. Or they don't accept him. They say, oh, well, he's got the weird shaped nose and the weird body, so he doesn't belong to one of us, and that's what turns him to a life of crime. Like, this commentary kind of writes itself. So if you're gonna do that and make this character a woman, you gotta lean more towards that character being a woman. Because when you set it in this very 40s inspired world, it's not exactly the 40s, but I think it's supposed to be a blend of modern day and 40s. You see what successful women in this world look like. That's the social elite. That's these characters trying to blend in. So it doesn't make sense that this character would still have the exact same outfit, the top hat and the monocle. The best comparison I can make is, let's say you take Catwoman and you make her Catman, and you make him very, very sexualized and into Batman and everything. You can technically do that, but you feel like you're kind of taking away something essential to what the character was about. It feels like this character was always designed to be very, very masculine, and Catwoman was designed to be very, very feminine. So when you make these changes, you either really have to commit to it, or you have to do something that really adds something more rather than takes away from it. The idea of giving her two sons, I think, is kind of fun. It kind of has a little bit of a Futurama vibe to it. I was even thinking to myself, man, if they just made this a completely different character, no connection to the Penguin, maybe there'd be something, but it still doesn't work because A, the Penguin is still very boring in this. She just kind of screams and yells at henchmen, and that's about it. And B, without going into too many spoilers, the two sons are not in the picture very long, so even that's kind of a wasted opportunity.
Asking the question on everyone's mind these days, what do you think about the Batman?
And why is he on a different streaming service? Even the main characters are not done that great. I was really shocked at how not interesting Batman is. For example, they dive into it. You ready for this? You've never heard this with Batman before. You ready? Him dealing with the fact that his parents are dead. What? Yes, this Batman is going there. And what's so strange is that they really dive into him losing his parents as a child, which, you know, makes sense. And actually the expressions on him, I think, are very effectively done. It's probably the best drawn young Bruce Wayne I've seen. He looks like the most traumatized, and, you know, it is kind of heartbreaking to see. But then as a little boy shortly after, that's when he decides to become Batman. Like, he goes into Alfred's room as a little boy and says, I'm gonna get revenge and you're gonna help me. It's unintentionally pretty funny. I feel like Batman should always decide to be Batman around college age, because if you decide as a little boy, it's already making a silly idea even sillier. Like, instead of Alfred looking horrified, I can see him being like, oh yes, Master Bruce, you can be a bat today, just show up for dinner tonight. You know, like, it's just something he's gonna grow out of.
This man is not a hero, he's a criminal, and his time in Gotham is up.
Yeah, you're right, because Batman weirdly isn't in this show that much. You can tell they're trying to create an arc for Batman in a similar way they did in the Batman movie, which was very well done in that film. He goes from this character of vengeance and darkness to suddenly this literal guiding light, this beacon of light helping people, and he's this symbol of helping and hope instead of something that's supposed to be feared. And in this one, without going into spoilers, he calls someone by a different name at the end, and he picks up a weapon and doesn't use it, which you could already predict he was going to do anyway, but it's just really lame and not that interesting. And for a character as fascinating as Batman, I mean, we have delved so much into this character for decades and decades. This is really not that interesting, and I could really care less about him. And man, is it rare that I say that about an animated Batman. I mean, Batman, the animated universe, is usually done spectacularly, and it's so strange that I just don't care about this character in the slightest. Part of that might be the voice, and I'm sad to say it doesn't turn out to be that great. I will say at first I was digging it because it sounds like a mix of Kevin Conroy's take on the character and Robert Pattinson's take on the character, and I think that makes sense because this is him starting out. Not a lot of people think Batman even exists, so again, you can kind of say this is a younger version of him, and it's not a bad mix. But here's the thing, when Kevin Conroy was doing the Batman voice, he said that he thought Batman, himself was the real voice, and Bruce Wayne was kind of the nicer, gentler, fake persona. And they're trying to do that here, except for the fact that Batman's voice is very clearly a voice, and it kind of sounds like Keanu Reeves from The Matrix.
James Craddock, I know who you're pretending to be.
Really good noodles. There's a scene where they're in the car, and he's just using his normal Bruce Wayne voice on the phone. Oh yes, absolutely, that's good to know. Step on it, Pennyworth. And it just sounds hilarious, and it's not supposed to. And the sad thing, too, is that whenever it gets to moments where Batman is supposed to emote, and he's still doing that voice, it sounds ridiculous. It can't be very expressive. He's supposed to have some really emotional powerhouse moments, but he just sounds so disinterested.
Kill me before he makes me kill you.
No, never.
Father, I had a feeling today.
Well, don't, son.
I think if you're gonna make this Batman voice like that's his real voice, it has to have range, and there's really not that much range to this voice, sadly. The supporting cast also isn't that great. Jim Gordon is a complete bore in this, which is a shame. I really liked Gordon in Matt Reeves' The Batman. He was actually one of my favorite Gordons. I was looking forward to something like that here. Barbara is very whiny in this. I feel like with Montoya and Batman, you see them put in the work. You see what they have to go through to get the bad guys and keep up justice, so you can see why they have kind of this hardened look on the world. But with Barbara, you just see her finishing up a case. She's a lawyer in this, and she either wins or she doesn't, and either way she complains. And you could definitely make the argument this is supposed to build up something that's coming later. There is a little bit of a change with the character, but there's two problems with that. One, I feel like you're supposed to still be rooting for this character even before that change happens, and I know I definitely wasn't. I found her very annoying. And B, even after the change, she still isn't interesting. And also for a character that's supposed to be Batgirl eventually, she has to get saved a lot. Like, I really don't see her putting on the cape and cowl and kicking ass. I just do not see this as a future superhero. So, okay. Wow, you must think I hate this show and that nothing works in it whatsoever. And that's not true. There actually are a few things that are quite effective in this. I'd say there's about 2.5 good episodes in this. The one episode I really liked, which I hinted to before, is the one with Montoya. This is actually the first time I've seen this character in something where I say, I kind of want a spin-off series with this character. I liked her fine in the past, but here in the detective role, I really think they make the character very stylized, and the episode is very stylized as well. It's an episode with Clayface, and they do make a lot of changes to Clayface to a point where I was even kind of wondering if it was a Clayface episode, and I like that. I like it still keeps true to what the character is about. It's an interesting mystery, and you get to see Gotham's take in this kind of 40s world of Hollywood, and it has a real Sunset Boulevard vibe to it. It's very well done, and I also really like, too, that Montoya, worked her ass off to solve this case, and Batman is practically just following her most of the time. He's not even doing that much detective work. And I just love, she cracks the case, she figures it all out, and yet this character who's in the shadows, you're not supposed to know he exists, a lot of people don't even think he exists, is getting more attention than her. I think that's really, really funny.
I won't say it's gonna be easy, but catching criminals is what we do.
Yes, it's holding on to them that you have difficulty with. The episode with Natalia is very well done. That's the one that I feel like probably had the most connection to the original animated series. I thought that was pretty well handled. And I like too, there's a little bit of a Grimm's fairy tale vibe to it, where always do as you're told or else this kind of boogeyman might get you. And even then you don't really know, can you trust this character, can you not? That they work with it very well. And there's also a good preview of Robin in this, and it's a Robin that we haven't seen much in animation. I was kind of saying, okay, this is aside from Montoya, this is the one thing I was saying, I wouldn't mind seeing more of this in the future, what they're going to do with this. And then there's a half a good episode with what they do with Harley Quinn. This is an example of half the changes working okay. So first off, they do not connect her to the Joker, which I didn't think I would like, but the more I thought about it, Joker has just been shoehorned into everything Batman. Joker's one of my favorite characters. I got a picture of him right there, man. I love the Joker, but he is overused. He's way too overused and squeezed into areas that he doesn't need to be in Batman, and without giving away too much, they do it here too, but not with Harley Quinn. So I was kind of happy that they have her as a character that exists on her own. They make her Asian in this, which I feel like visually the aesthetic of that in the costume looks really good. And the idea is kind of interesting. She's a therapist that talks to wealthy men and uses the secrets that they tell her against them. I think that's a really cool, clever idea. Now, in my opinion, I feel like it'd be creepier if it was just anyone. She seems to just go after wealthy men, and I feel like if it was more innocent people sort of giving their secrets, and then she like blackmails them or drives them crazy, like, you know, the therapist you're talking to is actually a crazy person. I think that's just a really cool, creepy idea. It doesn't have to be just made for the wealthy, but again, they're very clearly trying to hammer in this commentary about wealth imbalance. That's a little on the nose, but at the same time, they'll change up things that make her a little bit more interesting. For example, when she's not in costume, that's when she's a little bit more playful and lighthearted and kind of hyper. But when she's in the costume, she's much more reserved and creepy. And I think that's interesting because she's dressed like a clown. You think that would be the loud, exciting persona, but it's not. So I think those contradictions actually do make the character more interesting. But even there, I feel like you could do more with it. Like, why does she only go after men? We've seen with the Penguin, there's obviously rich, corrupt women in this world too. Does she have a hatred for men or anything? Or is it just a coincidence? They never dive into that. I feel like you could have done more with these men. Like maybe they're looking to change their ways. Like if they're going to a therapist, they must be going for a reason. And maybe they're confessing these secrets to her. Like they actually do want to get better. But then she does this crazy stuff that actually has them revert back to this terrible way. You know, like there's a tragedy in that. But they don't do that. They just make rich men or bad rich men, unless you're Bruce Wayne, in this. And again, I find that really boring. But there's a seed of a good idea here. Like I like to see this developed even more.
He knows too much. He's an itch that needs to get scratched.
Oh right, I forgot Catwoman's in this. How can a show make me forget Catwoman is in this? The original animated series had a slight lean towards the Fleischer Superman cartoons of the day. This one leans a lot more towards it, and it does look pretty good. There's even a scene where they slip in Fleischer Lois Lane into a bunch of reporters, and you would just never notice. She blends in so perfectly. And I think that's really cool. Instead of trying to create something really new with the backgrounds and with this world, they just say, let's lean heavier into it, into this world of Fleischer, and I really enjoy that. I would have liked if they made the line work on the characters a little softer, like the Fleischer cartoons, but again, that's kind of nitpicking, and you do want some connection to the original animated series, so I think that makes sense. But visually, the show does look very, very good. But it's the core of the show, the heart of the show, the center, that doesn't work. And every time they introduce something that looks like it could be really interesting, they don't really go anywhere with it. There's one character that shows up, he has just this dot on his face and this fedora hat, and he's this assassin. I'm thinking, oh man, what are they gonna do with this character? He looks really cool. And literally all he says is stuff like, bang, bang, bang. If somebody's dripping blood, he goes drip, drip, drip. Like, that's it. Like, this could have been a really cool character, and they just don't do anything with him. I feel like there's so many wasted opportunities in this show. But I will say, I don't hate it. I feel like there are nuggets of good ideas and cool moments, but I mean, they're definitely not the majority in this. It's funny because back in the day, you had two competing shows. You had X-Men and Batman, even though they were on the same network. One kind of envied the other. X-Men didn't have as good animation, or let's be honest, even as good storytelling as Batman. Batman had a more clean, artistic style, and it had much more gothic, psychological stories. But X-Men did really gravitate towards that comic book world of throwing a lot of information at you, and it was always more successful. It had a lot more people watching it. And now, years later, both these shows come back in different ways, and it's so ironic that the show that's doing better, again, X-Men 97, is doing better because they didn't change that much. They just leaned harder into what the strengths of the original show were, and they just delve full force into it. And now you have this Batman show that isn't doing as well. It's a critical hit, but I see a lot of people really divisive on it, and I think you can very clearly see why. And I think that's because they're trying to fix what isn't broken. You can make these changes, but they have to add to the character, not take away from the characters. Because so many of these moments that I feel like we're supposed to have like just our hearts ripped out and feel terrible for, I just felt nothing. It feels empty. You should be taking something away from it, not nothing. So I'm sadly giving this 2 out of 4. I believed in Harvey Dent buttons. When Kite Man is the DC animated show that has more life and imagination, you know there's a problem. With that said, what do you think? Because I've seen quite a few reactions around this. Like I said, critically it's doing very, very well, but in terms of fans and friends and stuff like that, I've seen a lot of divide. Are you one of those people that agrees with the critics and thinks this is great and the changes all work and it really, really makes sense and it breathes new life into this world? Or do you think the changes just absolutely nuked everything and it's all destroyed, and everything that this show could have been and could have evolved Batman to a new place just is totally botched up? Or are you somewhere in between where you say, you know what, I like the animated series, I like seeing Batman in animation in this style, and it's just cool to see him in this awesome looking Gotham City again? Let me know your thoughts and I'll see you next time. Take care.